Today's guest is someone whose journey goes far beyond sports. From the pale football fields of Tampa to becoming an All-SIAC defensive back at Fort Valley State, to coaching, mentoring, ministry, and becoming a nationally respected voice in emotional intelligence. Dr. Lorenzo Carswell has dedicated his life to helping people understand not just how to compete, but how to lead, grow, and navigate life emotionally. This conversation is about athletics, identity, adversity, leadership, and emotional intelligence, and how all those things connect. Because sometimes the biggest battles athletes face aren't physical. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Stacees and All and Locker Rooms to Life. I'm with my main man, longtime friend, longtime buddy. Met him through a friend of a friend. This is Dr. Lorenzo Carswell.
Hey, Stacey, how you doing, man? Thank you, bro. It's good seeing you over all these years, man, and I appreciate it. You made me sound like a superhero, but I'm here ready to just spread this knowledge, man.
Man, it's great to see you. I've been following you for years now online, seeing the things that you've been doing. And I knew him back when it was just Lorenzo Carswell. It was coach and teacher. Now he's doing big things, and it's Dr. Lorenzo Carswell. I want to make sure that I emphasize the doctor because he put a lot of work into that, and he's really doing a lot of great things. Yeah. So let's get into it today. Are you ready?
Hey, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right,
let's do
it. You again. And we know you're from Tampa,
right?
And take us back to growing up in Tampa and your upbringing, with the family and all. Tell us about it.
Okay, I'll do the fast route here. Back when I was young, between 0 and 6 years old, I lived with my mother in a single parent home in the Ponce de Leon projects in the Tampa area, Belma Heights area. And from there, my mom had 3 other boys. I'm the oldest of 4 boys.
Okay.
And from that point, she pretty much had health issues and so forth. So handling 4 boys was hard. So she allowed me, being the oldest, and my brother next to me, Tony, since we both have the same father,
okay,
to live with our grandmother. So that's when we moved over into an area in Tampa that's called the Mellowville area. And we lived over there for about 6 or 7 years with my grandmother until my mom came back and picked us up and brought us back to reunite with my other brothers at 12 years old when I was 12 years old. So we had a mixture of different family structures, single parent home, then my grandmother and grandfather, along with my uncles and aunts. We stayed in that same little house, looked like Little House on the Prairie. And really, it was a wooden white house with the stairs to go up into the house. But anyway, had a pretty good life with my grandmother. Those adolescent years are the most important years.
Exactly.
When it comes to developing, who you may become, and so forth. So I had a pretty good upbringing, having to come in the house, make sure I get from school, doing my homework.
Yep.
Along with, before we do any plan, doing our chores. So I learned how to wash dishes and mop the floor and clean the bathroom and so forth. So all of those values helped shape me, as a teenager when I moved back into the projects with my mother at 12, 13 years old. So I already had a pretty sound foundation, So growing up in, it was a pretty good, I mean, we didn't have the most, but we lived in a pretty poverty, structure or household, So my mom, regardless of her work, she worked with like cerebral palsy kids.
Okay.
It's a place called United Cerebral Palsy that was in Tampa, and she worked for them until her health issues declined, and then she had to stop working. Being that she didn't qualify for disability still, and I don't know why, but she ended up being on welfare and so forth and getting food stamps. So that's the kind of household we grew up in when I came back from living with my grandmother to my mom at 12, 13 years old. So pretty much me being the oldest, I was, like the man of the house.
So So what did sports mean to you as a kid? Facing all that adversity, with your grandma and then back with moms. What did playing sports mean to you?
Well, sports at the time, I wasn't even aware of it. I just knew as kids living with my grandmother, being 8 years old, being young,
Yep.
not all we were in at that time was comic heroes, the Hulk and Spider-Man and Superman and so forth.
Yeah.
But being that my uncle is 3 years older than my uncle Van, we were very close. People thought we were brothers. So from him playing football, I got into playing because I wanted to go walk to the park with him, and they were playing in uniforms and everything. So I was just like, wow. I say, man, this looks exciting. So we used to play what we call throw up tackle back in the day in the neighborhood. But
we called it kill or carry.
Yeah, but seeing them and the older guys playing in just structured football with uniforms, I got excited. So the next year, I ended up registering for the Power League, what we call Packers at that time, over at Woodland Terrace Park, over off of 30th Street in Hannah.
All right.
Yeah, so from there, I learned the game of football by watching the older guys that were 3-4 years older than me. So that's where I got the interest from.
So your family already had, athletic respect in the neighborhood. So did that give you more direction and more push to continue that legacy of the family being athletic and just to make you think ahead of the game?
Yes, most definitely. Being that I came from, my grandmother, had 8 kids. 6 of those kids, 5 of those kids being men, which were my uncles. All of them was athletic. My uncle played baseball. My dad ran track. Then my other uncles played football.
Okay.
So I got that influence from them, seeing them play, in high school. Even one of my uncles back in the day when they allowed you walked on for the Tampa Bay Bucks. However, he didn't make it, but still, watching him and being with him all the time, I seen him, prepare and how to prepare for the NFL,
exactly,
and so forth. Yeah.
You had that work in, man.
Yeah.
So it was a grind from way back in the day, just watching.
Yeah, just watching, man. Just watching my uncles, and like I say, they played, from high school to, the different little league to high school, seeing them play.
So you were heavily recruited coming out of high school. Tell us about your high school days and what did you play in? What sports you played and you were recruited. How did that happen?
Yeah, I went to Tampa Bay Tech High School, graduated in 1988. So I came in at 85. That was the time when high school started in 10th grade.
Okay.
So I had ran track in middle school, and that was about it. I was too small to play football when they had structured football in middle school. I was too small. I didn't wear enough, but when I got to high school, I ended up playing football, track, and basketball, and also played in the band. I call that a sport, So I was multi-talented and succeeded in each one of them. Basketball was my least, as far as performance-wise, but I had good defense, so it allowed me the opportunity to at least get an opportunity for 2 scholarships for basketball at Christian schools. And football, I had from Notre Dame, the University of Virginia, East Carolina, Valdosta State, Albany State. And at Fort Valley, I walked on due to my high school football coach being a former athlete at Fort Valley.
Okay.
So he recommended that I go to Fort Valley, so he taught the coach, Doug Porter, for me to come and walk on.
That was the head coach?
That was the head coach at the time, who formerly was the quarterback coach, who coached Doug Williams at Grambling.
Okay.
Yes.
So was that a tough decision? Because I know you had a lot of humongous big schools looking at you, and then, you go into a little bit smaller school at Fort Valley. Was that a tough decision to do?
Well, it wasn't a tough decision because at that time, I didn't have too much of a decision because of my grades. I graduated with 2.6.
Okay.
And then my SAT and ACT scores, I did not pass them.
I see what you're saying.
So therefore, I only had limited opportunities to go to certain colleges. So
Exactly.
at that time, I chose to walk on at Fort Valley and just go by faith at that time. And end up getting a scholarship during that second year when I was there.
So what did that experience teach you about discipline and just sticking to the course of what you were trying to do?
Good question. Being that my dad was a minister, he passed away last year in March.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. But he definitely was a huge influence on my life. He always supported me, always told me he loved me. Good job, son. Patted me on the head and the back. And that's the kind of love we need to give our sons. So I was encouraged and knew by faith I was taking the right step.
Okay.
And instead of trying to go on these half scholarships at Cheney State and so forth, and different other scholarships, I had the opportunity to go Morehead State, all of that. It gave me an opportunity to just say, hey, I'm 4 hours from home. I still see my mom, travel back and forth. So I made the decision. It was the best decision I made in my life.
And I was reading something about you being a fourth stringer, and then you went from fourth string to a starter.
Yes.
Tell us about that experience and what happened to from dust to stardom overnight.
Amen. Yeah. It was just my timing. It was just timing, because actually, if I go back a little ways, when I went in, it was like 20 DBs fighting for a fourth, because you had to at least be fourth string to make the dress squad.
Okay.
So I was on the scout team. I hadn't even made it to the dress squad. So fortunately, at that time, I think it was like 6 or 7 of us from Florida.
Okay.
Out of the 11 that played on that scout team. Between Miami, Bartow, Lakeland, Tampa, and so St. Pete. Yeah. So I remember us stopping the offense 11 times on the 1 yard line. And then I was called up, Carswell. And at that time, I knew I had made the dress squad when they called me on the other side of the field. And at that time, to answer your question, going from fourth string to first string, a starting DB, very good guy, he missed curfew. He missed curfew. So by him missing curfew, the rule was that you had to sit out 2 weeks. So then everybody moved up. So I became third string. The next guy in line from Miami, oh man, 6'2", 215, strong safety. He ended up with his ACL, tearing his ACL.
Yep.
And so forth. So I moved up all in 1 week. And I don't wish bad on anybody, but it was just my timing. And I just beat the other guy out that week. So they started me. And during that first game, I had a super game. Yeah, that started me on to stardom. Yeah.
Were you mentally prepared for that moment, or were you forced to grow up in the situation?
No, great question. I was prepared, very prepared, because my defensive back coach at the time, his name is Dean Brown, played back in the 60s for Miami Dolphins and Cleveland Browns.
All right.
So he prepared us mentally. All we did was work on our form, our technique. And he would always say, hey, if you got your technique down, you're good. You know your speed, you know the speed of your opponent, you're good. So I was prepared.
I have to go back. You said something that just hit me that I think parents, dads, big brothers, you said your dad used to tell you, I love you, son. And I don't think, especially in our community, we don't hear that from dads, from men in general. But I really think that's important. And that struck me when you said, like, your dad will tell you, I love you. I try to make sure I tell my kids that, my grandson that, and I really think that's really big for us to do. And so just to hear you say that and your dad, it's just like,
yes, sir. Yeah. Man. Yeah. Well, we need more of that. Yeah.
Yes.
This episode is brought to you by Stacees Sports Training Facility. For over 19 years, we've helped athletes improve their speed, strength, agility, and overall performance. from youth athletes all the way to the professional level. If you're serious about taking your game to the next level, summer workouts are officially underway. Located in Clearwater, Florida. Come put the work in. DM or call now for training information and availability.
Dr. Lowe, you were an NFL prospect, and in your senior year, you faced some adversity. So
Right.
I don't want to say tragedies, but adversity. And how did that affect you mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, well, it affected me very emotionally and mentally due to the fact that, I was expecting to be in that draft, and I was an NFL prospect based on Coach Dean Brown, who played, I told you, he played for the Miami Dolphins and Cleveland Browns.
Exactly.
Nobody else knew. However, he told me personally that scouts were looking at me and to just keep a stable mindset. So he said, you don't have to go bragging or whatever, but he kept me, in a position to where I was humble. So based on that and the adversity that I challenged that senior year, going into my senior year, we had to run the 40. And ended up pulling my hamstring on my right leg. So I had to sit out the first 2 games.
Okay.
So I rehabilitated, came back, had a pretty fair game. But unfortunately, a guy broke on the sideline running for a touchdown. And as I was closing in on him to reach to grab him, the left hamstring pulled. So I had 2 hamstrings that I was working on. And from there, it just went down here. I hurt my shoulder, which still sometimes bother me, my ankle and my toe, all in 1 year.
Yeah.
So that kind of, stopped me from, being looked at, in other words. So from that point, it was hard for me to get back, only playing 5 games that senior year. So I wasn't noticed at all.
5.
Yeah, only 5 games because I was injured half of the season. So injuries can be very effective on your mental and your emotional.
That's what I was going to ask you. How difficult is that for an athlete just to see your dreams slipping away?
Yeah. So it's very difficult because being that you can't perform and you have this ability. And I was sitting on the sidelines watching my the second string come in and do his job, but I still cheered him on. Of course, that's the kind of athlete I am. I want the whole team to win.
Exactly.
However, to me, individually, it was like something just stuck me in my heart. For one, because my mom was, still, and my brother was still living in the project. And my dream was to get her out of the project and put her in a nice home, maybe get her a nice car, whatever, and I felt like a failure, from that point, with my brothers looking up to me and them being great athletes themselves, Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So do you think that experience had an everlasting, impact on how you perform today or things that you do, just from that experience alone? Not just
right.
Yeah.
Yes, as part of me at the time thinking that I was a failure, I got in this deep depression. I wouldn't watch football, seeing guys get drafted that I played with and against, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be there. So I stopped watching football, period.
Okay.
For about a year. And during that time I was in that depression, I actually parked at a graveyard because I used to go to the graveyard, for some reason or another. We live right behind the graveyard. And I just used to go there, to just chill. I know that sounds strange, but I used to go there to just chill. And, now I wouldn't do that, but at that time, unfortunately, man, this is really a hard conversation sometimes to talk about. But I almost committed suicide. I had a pistol to my head, sitting in the car in the graveyard, thinking I was a failure. And the only thing that struck me, and I thank God for it for this day, is that I remembered my daughter saying, "Dada." And I had a picture that I always carry around of her with me facing one way, and they put my daughter inside my head. So today, my daughter Benicia and I have this saying, "You're all in my head," So we know what that means. But at that time, I'm thank God for saving me.
Exactly.
Because I could have been gone, not had other kids, not been where I'm at right now to help other kids today. You know.
As athletes, we train our body and we prepare physically. However, as you were just saying, do you think it's a big responsibility for us athletes, student athletes, to be prepared emotionally for moments that you had, that we have sometimes, just to face adversity?
Yes, that's very important. I'm an expert in emotional intelligence since 2008. And when I learned of it, at first I didn't take it serious because it was this guy named Dr. Hank Clemens that came in to speak with the Hope Scholars and Collegiate 100 at Hillsborough College, known as HCC.
Okay.
Back in the day, but they changed to Hillsborough College now. Yeah. So Dr. Hank Clemens was talking this stuff about self-perception and making decisions. I was like, they know all this already. I said, man, this crap. And I told Dr. Hank Clemens, unfortunately, he passed away 2 years ago. And but I learned a lot from this gentleman. And with emotional intelligence, to answer your question, it's very much needed. It's more than athletic ability, because they need to learn how to perform and keep the right posture on and off the field, because once they get up, and if they have any type of plans to make it to the college level, Division I or professional, they need to have this high sense of emotional intelligence, because that can prevent them from NILs nowadays, that they have NILs. College players are getting paid these days. NFL teams are now, when they interview you, it's more than your athletic ability now. When they interview you, they want to know who are you really? Who are you? You need to protect the reputation of the team.
Parents, athletes, coaches, listen to this. This man is an expert on emotional intelligence, and he's saying stuff that's hitting right on the head. and I'm like, where were you 30 years ago? I still would have been playing in the league if I had you around. But this is some excellent information that you're saying, and I'm sitting here just in awe. That's why I'm like, keep talking, please.
Yeah. No, really, and not only reputation of the team. No disrespect to the parents, but that's the reputation of the parents as well. And the coaches. So everybody has an accountability to one another and an individual responsibility to ourselves.
Tell us, how did you get into, the field of emotional intelligence? I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong.
No, you're saying it right.
Because I really think that's something that we all need to know, not just athletes, but it pertains to us.
Everybody,
how did you stumble into that?
Well, like I was saying, when Dr. Hank Clemens was doing this seminar workshop with the Collegiate 100 and Hope Scholars of Hillsborough College, I got interested in it because one thing he said struck me. He said, well, people cut you off and so forth, and then they're down the street and you're still mad and you're still yelling and blowing your horn. They're gone. They're not even worried about you. And I thought about that. I said, that's me. I used to blow at people, and I'm not going to do it, but roll down my windows, you get the contacts, roll down my windows and say something or stick my hand out the window or something of that nature. And I'm like, I thought about it. I said, it makes sense. I'm still mad at who? They're gone. They're a mile, 2 miles down the road, and I'm still upset. So at that time, I became an advocate, an ambassador for emotional intelligence. And I stuck around Dr. Hank Clemens and just learned the game.
For people that's unfamiliar, what is emotional intelligence?
Great question. Emotional intelligence is controlling and managing your own emotions, as well as understanding other people's emotions and nonverbal cues and knowing how to respond to them. So that's the whole surface of, or perimeter of emotional intelligence, just knowing the self-expression, self-perception, decision-making, stress management, and relationship building and management skills.
Well, why is it so important for athletes, coaches, parents, leaders, for us all?
Well, emotional intelligence is very important. due to the fact that it helps us to understand ourselves, helps us to keep ourselves in the right posture to be able to be successful and to perform to our highest level. Because sometimes when we get distracted, it distracts us from performing to the highest level, and being that we don't perform to the highest level, then we don't get enough production out like we're supposed to.
Do you think a lot of athletes are emotionally conditioned, or are they emotionally unprepared?
Yeah, a great question. I think they're more emotionally unprepared because they're not aware of it. And that's the whole point of self-perception, being aware of your identity and who you are and what the game is about, what the rules are about. You know that there's going to be bad calls, but you go to the ref and yell in the ref's face, and now you're thrown out the game. So you got to be humble, just come back and get ready for that next play. We had a thing at Fort Valley State with our defensive backs. We said ICK. Okay. So when we broke the huddle, we said ICK, ICK. What does that mean? Intensity, consistency, and knowledge.
ICK.
Yeah. So we knew how to be intense on every play.
Exactly.
We had to be consistent on every play, talking, communicating to one another on the field. That's why we were ranked number 4 in the nation at one point.
Oh, shoot.
Fort Valley State, because we communicated. Ball. If ball going there, we all yelling ball. We're reminding each other in the huddle, hey, I'm going to the left, you go to the right on the blitz. So communication is very important as well,
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask, how does emotional intelligence affect leadership in the locker room?
Yeah.
And then you gave an example of in the huddle, ICK.
Right. So, and just reminding one another, it's okay. You don't have to be, stubborn and say, man, I know. Some people get aggravated because you're telling them something. It's just a communication so that we're on the same path. That's it. And that's how we was able to be the top DBs in Division II football. And we were compared to D1 schools. Because we communicated, we had that high sense of emotional intelligence, knowing our self-identity as part of knowing who we are as part of the team and what is our responsibility.
Would most athletes perform better if they were emotionally healthy or healthier?
Yes. Oh, yeah, they would perform much better because they would know their actual responsibilities as a DB, as a D lineman. What gap am I supposed to be in? DBs, what zone are we in? Or are we playing man to man? Understanding the calls and so forth, the signals, Yeah, so, when we went like this, it was man to man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we knew the signals. So you got to be knowledge. That's why I say intensity, consistency, and knowledge. You got to have knowledge of the game, and that's part of emotional intelligence because it makes you stick to your accountability to your particular position as well as the whole team.
I got to ask you, what's the difference between mental toughness and emotional intelligence? Or is there a difference?
There is a difference because sometimes we can perform, or in a sense of saying being a fake or fraudulent, because on the field, that you should be mental. The coach says, you're tired. What you gonna say? Yeah. That's mental toughness.
Okay.
But emotional intelligence is understanding why the coach wants you to be mentally tough, and understanding when you're tough, you're gonna stick to your responsibilities, or your mental state is right. You're gonna stick to your responsibilities, of course, and be able to do your job on the field.
How many championships while you were in college did you win?
I won 2 championships out of the 4 years that I was there. So 1 year we won it all the way out, and I have to say this. I have to say it. We didn't directly go through Savannah State, but we had to get by Savannah State in order to get to the championship. So that's the time when Shannon Sharp was playing with them. And boy, when I tell you, that guy was tough, man. I actually got blindsided by him twice in that game. And
he was a big dude too.
Man, was he? Man, he would, hit you, and then when you're down on the ground, he'll stand over you. And so much respect to Shannon Sharp. But it was a pleasure being able to have that history with him, to play him twice in my career. And like I say, great guy. Still caught over 300 yards on us. That was shutting him down at the time. He was catching 500, 600 yards a game, which was crazy. So we had to get by Savannah State in order to get to the championship.
That's fresh. And you did a lot of fresh things, great things after athletics.
Yes.
Why was mentoring young people so important to you?